Inzamam, welcome. What is the latest?
Well, Alex, look, let me try and break down for you how the day has looked today, because the information coming out of Pakistan has been very limited, whether you're inside the country or you're not. These peace talks, these negotiations have been taking place in a five-star hotel in the capital, Islamabad. And under one roof, you've got delegation from the United States spearheaded by Vice President J.D. Vance, and you've got a delegation from Iran, which is fronted by the Iranian parliamentary speaker and their foreign minister as well, all being mediated by the Pakistanis, including the Prime Minister and their Field Marshal General Asim Munir. So let me just try and break down what the days look like so far. The Iranians and the US delegations both met with a Pakistani Prime Minister separately in separate rooms, having discussions about what they essentially wanted to try and get out of these negotiations. Those conversations happened separately initially, after then convincing Iran and the US to meet face to face by the Pakistanis. They then met in a room, in the same room, and thrashed out a conversation. We're still unclear exactly how long that meeting between the Iranian delegation and the US delegation went on for. And that's a pretty historical moment, it has to be said, Alex, because it's the first time in almost 50 years where a vice president of the United States has been in a room with senior leadership figures with Iran, having these sort of discussions. And Pakistan has enabled that now. We are over 6 weeks into this conflict that started by the US and Israel attacking Iran initially. And then we were told then by one of the members of the Iranian delegation, a conversation that I had with one of the Iranian delegation members, that talks have gone well so far and that America is listening. We've got to remember, Alex, that Iran are going into these talks very confident. They feel that they essentially have the upper hand when it comes to these talks. And that's because, you know, they're going in with a strong delegation of around 70 people. They feel that they've got the upper hand when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz. They feel that the reason that the Americans are talking to them right now is because of their peace proposal that they put on the table. And they essentially feel that it is America that wants to get out of this war a lot sooner than anyone else does. Importantly as well, they've come with experts to this trip to Pakistan, people who can talk about lifting sanctions, unfreezing sanctions, people also who can talk about their nuclear enrichment program as well, which means they're pretty serious about having those hardline discussions when it comes to these negotiations. And obviously, in turn, we know that the US has come along with the Vice President J.D. Vance, with envoy Steve Witkoff, and of course, Jared Kushner as well. And they come armed essentially with President Trump's red lines in this negotiation. So look, it seems that talks have been going on. On the Iranian side, they've told us that it seems that talks are going well, and it feels that maybe there'll be further talks this evening and maybe even tomorrow in Islamabad. Alex.
We'll take it, Inzamam. It sounds like there are things that are percolating on a positive level, so that's great. We'll see if it plays out. Thank you so much. Let's go to MS Now White House reporter Jake Traylor. So, Jake, regarding J.D. Vance, you've got exclusive reporting on how the vice president's position against the war is now affecting his standing in the administration. What can you tell us?
Yeah, Alex, the overall takeaway I had is just how remarkable it is that it is the Vice President J.D. Vance, the largest dissenter and person in opposition to this war with Iran all along, that is now leading the peace talks from the United States side actively as we speak. And that came at a cost. I spoke with multiple White House officials extensively about J.D. Vance, how he all along has privately been voicing a lot of opposition to this war, and that has cost him some influence inside of the White House. One official told me that Vance's national security team has grown, quote, extremely weary. Another person told me that Vance has lost some, quote, clout inside of the White House because of his dissent of the war. So internally, he's lost some influence there, according to some officials. We also know that besides his dissent there, I talked to another White House official who just described how interesting it is that the dichotomy of Vance not wanting this war in the first place, but now leading the negotiations. An advantage to that one White House official told me was that the Iranian regime officials know that Vance is an honest broker here that wants an end to this war because he's privately spoken about that all along. A potential disadvantage, though, that another White House official told me is that he might soften the tone of President Trump, who's been very aggressive in this war so far, and undercut whatever remaining leverage Trump may have here in these peace talks. So a really interesting moment as we wait to hear out any readout from how this went. But President Trump spoke about how he foresees Vance going into these negotiations yesterday to reporters. Take a listen.
Well, I wish him luck. He's got a big thing. We'll find out what's going on. They're militarily defeated, and now we're going to open up the Gulf with or without him. But that'll be open. We're going to be, or the Strait as they call it, and I think it's going to go pretty quickly. And if it doesn't, we'll be able to finish it off. So we'll see how it turns out. So it's JD and Steve and Jared. You have a good team, and they meet tomorrow. We'll see how it all works out.
Alex, literally seconds ago, I spoke with a senior White House official who said, as we speak, the conversations are still ongoing. Of course, as we hear any readout as to the details, how well they're going from the United States side, we'll make sure and bring that straight to you.
And I will look forward to that. Come on back anytime you've got it. Thanks, Jake. Let's bring in Shelby Talcott, White House correspondent for Semaphore, and Joel Rubin, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for the Obama administration and author of the briefing book on Substack. Welcome to you both. So, Shelby, how do you see, and what's your reporting from within the White House in terms of J.D. Vance's role in today's negotiations? Where does his presence, by the way, leave Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff? Of course, they were originally tasked to spearhead these talks. They were the ones who were spearheading the talks that wrapped up maybe 24 hours unsuccessfully before Trump started launching the bombs.
Yeah, I think one aspect that's really interesting about who is leading these negotiations is for weeks before today's discussions, we had heard from senior White House officials who said that the vice president was sort of secondarily participating in conversations. He would be, talking to the president. He wasn't doing direct conversations like Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner were. But the caveat was, if things progressed enough, he could be brought in. And so this is something that the administration has been thinking about for a while, is bringing him in. And from my understanding, when I've talked to White House officials and administration officials, the thinking is that the benefits of bringing him in, because he has been sort of the most anti-war of this administration, outweigh the potential cons that could come with him leading these negotiations. And of course, you have Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner still there. Those are two people that the president trusts highly to do these discussions. They've really been leading every sort of big foreign policy peace discussion of this term. And so I think it's notable that all three of them are now going.
So, Joel, give us some insight into what it is like negotiating with the Iranians. Do you believe that the president's claim that the new leaders with whom they are negotiating are more flexible than the ones who were in place when you worked in the White House?
Oh, Alex, they're hardline, right? Like, let's just be very clear. There's not going to be a different attitude coming from the Iranians. And as even was just reported in the opening, they're coming in with a little bit of arrogance and the sense that maybe they've won this war, which I think is a serious misread. Look, as Shelby is pointing out, in many ways, the vice president is the Iran whisperer in this White House. He's the one who is most interested in engaging diplomatically, and he's just scored the highest level meeting for an American official in the history of the U.S.-Iran relationship since the revolution in 1979. So Iran should not overplay their hand, but they are certainly going to come in with a lot of heavy demands. They've been kind of telegraphing that already for a number of days. And the risk for them is that if Vance looks and says, I'm not agreeing with this, they've lost their only ally in the White House, and then we're in a whole other world of hurt.
But, Joel, is it the Iranians' belief that the reason they have the upper hand is because they control the Strait of Hormuz? And if that's true,
Sure.
Do you agree? Are they right?
I think that there's two truths here. One is that they have been incredibly effective at shutting down a key aspect of the global economy and causing pain, which is the shutdown of the Strait. And that's why we the United States want to get into these talks. And on the other side, they've been devastated militarily. And, it took 6 weeks of hard hitting against them for the Iranians to finally agree to meet directly with American officials. Remember, they didn't even do that during the Biden administration. Unfortunately, for the 4 years that the Biden team was looking to get back into the Iran nuclear deal, the Iranians didn't want to meet face to face. So I think, quite honestly, it's both sides took their best shots. Now there's a chance for leveraging what just took place and from both directions. And we'll see what they come up with. My hope is that they have real clear terms of reference coming out of this, that we understand the framework for future negotiations that are very clear on what the details need to be about the nuclear issues, the missile issues, sanctions issues, the Strait of Hormuz, you name it. But there has to be a piece of paper that both sides agree on, and that they agree it says exactly what it says on paper, which we've kind of had that confusion the last several days. That's what we need out of these talks.
Yeah, I want to get to that confusion in just a second. But Shelby, at the center of today's negotiations is this very fragile 2-week ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran. So what is the White House plan if these talks fail?
Well, listen, you've heard from the president directly. He has said that if talks fail and if Iran doesn't agree to what the U.S. wants, he's going to go in and go back to hitting them just as hard, if not harder, than they have been hit. And so there's a real risk that this ceasefire doesn't last. Now, I've talked to administration officials who have also said that as long as talks seem to be progressing, that's sort of what they're looking for. There's not expectations that today is going to end up with some sort of permanent peace deal. They expect that there's going to have to be multiple conversations. This is sort of the starting point. But everybody's really aware that the two sides are on pretty opposite sides of the spectrum with a number of issues. They still have to sort out sanctions. They still have to sort out nuclear. They still have to sort out what the end game is with the Strait of Hormuz. So there's a lot of big conversations that are only just going to be started this afternoon.